Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we have got a wonderful friend on today that we met at the Compassionate Friends, and I'm so excited to have him on. And he's a wonderful musician as well as human being. Would you like to introduce him, Heidi?
Sure, I'd love to. And like you said, Mom, we met him at the Compassionate Friends, and he was playing amazing music. He's a very, very skilled musician, and we'll talk more about that. And his name is Nate McClendon, and he is the author of The Emerging You, A New Approach to Grief and the Griever. Here it is. I've read it. It's a fabulous book. In 2014, Nate's 18-year-old daughter, Naomi, accidentally fell from a 10-story building. Nate is currently today the Community Engagement Specialist at Kansas State University's Beach Museum of Art. He has worked with the Grammy Foundation, the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and the Art Bridges Foundation. Welcome to our podcast, Nate.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate you inviting me.
It's wonderful to have you on it. I love your perspective. I called the show Finding Yourself in the Midst of Grief and Trauma. And you had quite a trauma with your daughter, Naomi, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How many years ago has that been?
We just passed the 10-year marker this past spring in March 30th. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's been 10 years.
Wow. It goes by, doesn't it?
It does. It's amazing because 10 years feels like an eternity, and at the same time, it feels like yesterday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How did Naomi's death change you?
Well, it changed me in a lot of ways. And speaking from 10 years out now, there's a whole gamut of things that you go through. Really what happened is it caused me to really take a look at who I am and what life is, what life means to me, and what I want life to be. Her death caused me to look at those questions at a level that I hadn't before, which I thought I had answered those questions and thought about that type of thing before. But a death like this, you have to really look at what is the meaning of life in a completely different way. One of the things that I will say has changed the most is that my capacity to love has increased. I certainly love, and this is a weird thing to say, but I certainly love Naomi more today than I did when she was alive. And that's only because my capacity to love has grown because of her death. It's one of the ways it's changed me. It's caused me to see that in all of life and in people in general. We have the capacity to love much more than we realize we do.
Well, I think that, Naomi was in the prime of her life. She was a dynamic, incredible girl at Arizona State University. And my brother was in the prime of his life as a 17-year-old and died tragically in a car accident. And it does make you really appreciate people and, love on such a level when these people all of a sudden leave your life and die suddenly. I certainly feel like I love at a deeper level too, and really appreciate people that are here on the earth with me and are in my life.
One of the things that happened for me is as I was going through my grief and exploring, how much I loved Naomi, I came to the realization that she was so special and unique, not just because of all the things I could remember and all the things that I knew her as, but just because she was in general, just the person that she was, regardless of all the attributes and the wonderful things. Just her nature, just the fact that she was an amazing thing. And as I came to that realization, I understood that that's true of everybody, and people, whether they know it or not, whether it's expressed or not, they are loved more than they understand, and they're more valuable than they understand.
You're so unique and deep and understanding, and I just can't help but feel some of the ways that you've approached your grief has got to be as a result of being a musician and thinking on different levels.
Sure. Music is an incredible art form. And once you get into music, you really have to explore what it is to be human. I mean, that's what that art form is exploring what it means to be human. And it obviously played a huge role in my grief. In fact, it's still playing a huge role in my grief. Um, just this past year, I was finally able to start writing music again. So I've spent the last 9 years not being able to write. Um, because the trauma was so deep, and I wanted to write, and I wanted to write for and about Naomi, but it was too much. Like, you can't find the right notes or the melody or the harmony that is unique and special enough to express the feeling or do it in honor of a person. Like, I just couldn't find. I still struggle with that, but I have started writing again. But what it did for me is it changed my approach to performing. I am much more into performing for people and connecting with people through what I play versus trying to sound good or trying to be entertaining. It's, for me, it's really about just trying to cause people to have an experience.
I love it. I wondered if you'd play something for us and tell us about it.
I would love to play something for you. The piece I will play is called Always and Forever.
I love that.
It's by the jazz musician Pat Metheny. He's a guitarist. And the last thing I got to do with Naomi was take her to a Pat Metheny concert. And it was just her and I. So his music just holds a special meaning to me because the sound of his music now kind of embodies me spending time with Naomi. So after she passed, I spent a lot of time on the road driving back and forth from Manhattan, Kansas, to Kansas City, which is a 2-hour drive. And that's where I processed my grief. And a lot of times I just had Pat Metheny playing. So his music is just deeply embedded in my not only grief experience, but the healing experience as well. So yeah, I'll play the piece called Always and Forever.
Oh, Nate, that was absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
I love your music. You've done it at Compassionate Friends, and that was so touching. What
It was.
does that bring up for you when you play it?
So actually one of the neat things about music is it has the ability to capture time and feeling or emotion. If you like think back to a song that you heard in high school, and it immediately takes you back to that time period. You have those memories and you feel like you did back then. This song is like that for me. I can remember just so intently being so intently focused on Naomi. It was like we were together. So even when I play that, there's a certain warmth that overcomes me. There's like a certain place that I go to in my mind where I just feel I'm with her.
Mhm.
Uh,
It's been 10 years now, and I know when people hear this, it's taken you a while to come back, being able to write and do some of the things that you did in music. And I know you talk in your book about some phases, about 4 phases that you went through. And I wondered if you'd like to talk about those a little bit.
Sure. So in that book, The Emerging You, I kind of put grief into, yeah, 4 different phases of what happens. And at least it was how I perceived grief happening for me. And the first one I call the storm. And we're all familiar with what that feels like. Your world just comes crashing down. You don't understand anything, and you are feeling everything. Nothing makes sense, and everything hurts. Um, in this book, I kind of bring in some neuropsychology and understanding how the brain works to why we process things the way that we do. But that's the first phase, and in my experience and from talking to other bereaved parents and other grievers, that lasts for a couple years, and we live in a world that wants to give you maybe a month. you know
Right.
if you're in a good situation, you get like maybe a year, but it takes much longer just to get through that first part of the
Well,
storm. It's
well, and like you said in the book, Nate, it's like your life was torn from you. Our life is torn
absolutely.
from us in the storm. Everything we ever thought is put into question. Our whole world is turned upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just that you've lost this person that you love more than anything else. But on top of that, like, you yourself cease to exist. The person that you
Mhm.
were no longer exists. And so not only are we mourning the loss of this person, but we have lost our own center. Like, we don't even know who we are anymore.
Well, that's what my mom and I were saying when we were talking about this book before the show. We were saying it's an identity loss, and I don't think people talk enough about that. Who
Right.
are we now? Like you said, who is Nate without
Yeah.
Naomi? I mean, it is the loss of of our identities
and
initially.
it's even deeper than, am I still a father, am I still a brother
Mhm.
or a sister? Like, those questions are there, but it's much more deep than just that. Like, what do I even care about? What do I
Mhm.
value? Because you have to figure out, why am I going to wake up each day, and what am I going to do? Because the hard part, with Kubler-Ross, you have all these stages of grief, but at the end, you come to like a reconciling of your circumstance, and then you die, because that model was created for people that were going through their own demise, their own death. But for
Mhm.
us, we go through all these things, but the issue is, I still wake up every day. I still have life. So what am I going to do? What makes me wake up, and what am I going to do with the time that I have? And that's where a lot of the struggle is. So losing that identity, it that's where it plays out, is, what am I going to do with myself? And if I don't know who I am,
Mhm.
then I don't know what I'm going to do.
I
And
love this.
then you're
It's
talking about your
powerful.
next phase is our new normal.
What happens the second year is, for me, it was very depressing and lonely, because the world has moved on. The first year, you have all of the anniversaries and everything, and people remember that first year. And so the highs and lows are really high and low. But the second year, everybody's moved on except for
Right.
you. And it's
Mhm.
very lonely and very depressing. So by that third, fourth, fifth year, it's that new normal. Like, this is what life is. I remember thinking like, is this what grief is like? Do I carry this pain around forever? Like, what is this going to be? And it takes years to know what that normal is, you know, how people around you change, how your life changes, what matters, what doesn't matter. That's the new normal.
And then you get
Yeah,
to
and I'd say,
action, right? Talk about your action phase. I like that.
yeah. So once you've gone through the first two phases and you figured out what the new normal is, what happens in your mind is your mind has now relearned how to live. You've got different ideas of what's right and wrong, what matters, what doesn't matter, what you value, what you don't. And what that does is that creates a new set of actions for you to take. Do I want to be friends with these people? Do I not want to be friends with these people? Do they understand me? Do they not? Do I have a mission I want to be about? Do I just want to unplug from the world? Whatever the actions are, it's around that fifth, you know, once you get there, you now have a new set of ideas in which you're going to shape your life by. And that's where you actually start doing them. I would say probably for me, it was like around my fourth year is where I really started getting into that action. And it took me 3 years, but the big thing for me is I ended up resigning my position as a music teacher. And I loved teaching music. I still love it. And it was my identity. That's who I was. But I got to the point that what I understood about life and myself and what I wanted to do with my time, I had to make a decision. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, that decision was I can't be what I want to be and do what I want to do if I continue to teach. And again, I loved teaching. It took me 3 years to actually make the decision to leave my job. And that was, you know, leaving retirement benefits, all of that. I was 52 when I made that decision to leave teaching. But that's an example of an action, right? Like something
Right.
else is more important in life to me now, and I have to do something about it.
And now you're doing, would you say you continue with the emerging you?
Yeah. So, and even the title of that book is the premise is that there's a version of us that's wanting to come out, and it's always been there our whole life. But trauma like this kind of brings it up to the forefront where you have to address that. And so, yeah, going through the storm and finding the new normal and taking action, all of that leads you to the place where the you that you are, or that you're meant to be, or that you're going to be, is there and constantly, bit by bit, coming out to the fact that I'm here doing this podcast, right? I wouldn't have dreamt. I wrote a book, never would have guessed that, right? There's a me that's waiting to come and is coming and will still come. So all of that is there, and that's kind of what the book is about. And it's a very different approach to grief, because it's really focused on how we use our grief to build and become, instead of just survive or just get through. I think there's much more. I know for me, when I think about my daughter, her life means much more to me than just getting over it or getting through it or finding a way to live again. But I've learned things from her death, things that I don't know that I could have learned any other way. And I paid a dear price to learn those things. So I'm going to do something with that knowledge, right?
And Nate, I'm just wondering, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned?
That's a tough one. So the biggest thing that I learned was about the loving and like how we have a larger capacity. But the way you phrase that, I would say that time, that's the most precious gift that we have, and we all have it. We just don't know how much. Life is a precious thing. I think we're all keenly aware of that. What we do with that absolutely matters. And that was something I felt really strongly in those first couple years, because I watched people waste their time or spend their time on things that seemed so meaningless. And certainly back then I saw it with how they treated their children, or the way they disregarded each other. And like, why would you do that? But I was looking at it from a different point because of my own pain. Now it's really motivated out of love. Again, that's something that Naomi has left me, is
Mhm.
this um a capacity, but a desire to just want more, not just for me, but for all of us, because it's out there. We could be living so much better than we do live. And you can take that to mean whatever you want. Just look at the world. We could live a whole lot better than we do. And it's horrible that it took something like this for me to see it at the extent that I see it now. But yeah, that's the lesson, is I want to be part of what makes what makes the world better.
I love it, Nate. Well, thank you. You certainly are part of what makes the world better. Now, people can get your book where, and give us your websites. And I also know that you perform around, you have a trio that performs. So people will want to know where that is also. So where can they find you?
Sure. So the book is available on Amazon. That's the only place it's available right now. We're working on some more outlets for that. So you can get it there. My website is natemcclendon.com. So just my name, NATEMCCLENDON.com. There you can find links to the book, also my calendar where I'm performing. And I post a lot of my projects that I'm doing. I have a couple art projects where I'm going around interviewing people and just helping us to see each other better. You can find all of that all of those projects are on the website as well. So if you want to learn more about what I'm doing, natemcclendon.com.
Nate, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I really love everything you're doing, and you've got fabulous heart, and it's wonderful. And love to your wife. We didn't even get into the fact that you do have a wonderful partner.
Absolutely. It makes all the difference in the world too. And our relationship, it's been tested because this is hard, but it's been resilient. And I would say, we would both say that we are probably the biggest influence on how each other has, developed through all of this. So I owe everything to her.
Well, thank you, Nate. And like my mom said, you are making the world so much better than you found it. And I know Naomi is your guiding light. So thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me on the program too. I truly appreciate you.
Want to thank everybody for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.